The result of these actions, though, is that we get in a pattern where if people don't need us, we lose our sense of worth. And so that attachment to other people needing us, attaching their worth to what we're doing for them in their lives, when we are not quote unquote needed, then we might start to feel like we are not wanted, we don't belong, we are not good enough. And it can even result in like resentment towards other people. Hi, and welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swallows podcast, episode number 85. Today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about people-pleasing and codependency. And the context that we're going to be talking about codependency today is in relationships, especially friendship. I mean, there could be codependency in marriage, but I wanted to focus today's episode on codependent friendships. And before we begin, I'm going to tell you a little story, which I've probably shared on this podcast before. So once upon a time, I used to want to save everybody. I had no boundaries. I was also what I would call, for simplicity's sake, a super saver. I wanted to save everybody, including myself, but I wanted to save all the people from all the problems. So I was having a conversation at a gelato place with my best friend when we had a conversation about a friendship that I had complained to her about this friend on numerous occasions. And she looked at me dead in the eye and she was like, "Yeah, I think you're in a toxic friendship." And of course, I clutched my proverbial pearls and I was like, "Yeah, maybe you're right." And then what she said next was, "The reason you're in this friendship is because you need to be needed." And I was like, what? But she was so right. It sent me on a journey to find ways in which I was showing up in relationships for the purpose of being needed. For context, I am a firstborn child. I have two younger siblings and a half sibling, and the first age gap between my sister and I is 6 years, and my brother is 9 years younger than me, and my half brother is 21 years younger than me. So there is quite a gap in my age, and so I have always taken this responsibility of being the deputy parent, as my siblings call me, and which comes with a lot of parentification, I would say, taking over, responsibilities that were probably not mine to take from a very young age. And I'm also an Enneagram 2 with a wing 3, which I just want to help all the people and do the things, which is how I ended up in life coaching and healthcare. Not to defend the behavior, but I think I was a super saver right out of the womb. As I was able to evaluate these patterns in the relationship that I was questioning at the time, what I started to notice was that when I wasn't quote unquote needed in this friendship, I would get very resentful. I would get almost envious resentful. Like, how dare this person be okay, so they're not going to need me in the way that I have existed in this role for them. When we make plans, God laughs because I was literally like, I'm just going to get out of this relationship. And God was like, no, I'm going to keep you around to learn a few lessons. And so I did. But also, I think the timing of me having this discovery about my role as a codependent friend was perfect because it was also when I became a mom. And so I had to kind of realize, one, there was only so much of me that I could give to another person while a human being was depending on me for survival, right? Like, I had an infant, and so I had to channel my quote unquote being needed to that relationship of nurturing and providing for my daughter. So it worked out in the end, and so many lessons learned. And as much as I would like to say that it was an easy journey, I think it was very, very difficult because I think from both angles, the relationship was codependent and the roles that we were playing were this dance, and we had to step out of it. The funny thing is, I remember thinking one time I was going to run into this individual, and I remember thinking, I hope I don't run into this person because I want to have a good day. And I was like, how can I think that about a friend? Like, what is wrong with me? And I was questioning so much of myself, and I recently posted on Facebook about this experience, and it was so interesting how it resonated with so many people. And they were like, oh my God, I feel so seen. Thank you for sharing. And basically what I said was, it's okay to rest. It's okay to stop being the giver. It's okay to like step out of that role and realize that it's not going to be easy to step out of the role. It might be a little uncomfortable or a lot uncomfortable, but it's okay to step out of it. Because we have this one life to live, right? And we want to live it right. And I think not showing up authentically to be in relationships because we want to be in relationships versus because we are being needed and we have some sort of validation from being needed, I think it's a huge difference. And so if this is something that you've struggled with and if you've struggled with people pleasing, this episode is for you. So welcome. Hey, mama. You deserve a life free of overwhelm and burnout. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. I'm your host, life and mindset coach, Shiro Bergbauer. I'm also a wife, mom, and CRNA. This is the podcast for high-achieving mamas in medicine like you and I. Together, we'll learn how to navigate the ups and downs of working motherhood. If you're looking to thrive in your relationships and overcome overwhelm in your motherhood, marriage, and medicine, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. What is codependency? The American Psychological Association defines codependency as an unhealthy devotion to a relationship at the cost of one's personal and psychological needs. So they did this study and they found that codependency is correlated with greater self-consciousness, social anxiety, and dysfunctional attachment styles. While this is also used to describe romantic relationships, it can also be used to describe friendships. Before we go any deeper, I want to talk a little bit about attachment styles. This is from the work of John Bowlby and all the people that studied attachment. And there are 3 types of attachment styles. 1 is anxious, 2 is secure, and 3 is avoidant. And I think eventually I will do a podcast episode on attachment styles. For the sake of this podcast, I just want you to think about just saying that anxious attachment style is like that person who is very insecure, wants to be, where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? Don't make friends outside of this friendship, gets jealous and attached. And then secure is a person who is very secure in the relationship. And this is a general observation, right? And then avoidant is like the person who is nowhere to be found. And, you were like, they ghost you and then they reappear. And this is based on their own attachment and upbringing. But it does manifest in our relationships and how, we move through the world. Now, the other thing to know is that, we have different attachment needs. If those needs go unchecked and unmet, right, they show up in our relationships and we might be looking for them in other people who it's not their job to give them to us. So the 7 attachment needs that may be unmet in any relationship, whether it's romantic relationships, friendships, parenting relationship, all of that is based on, again, attachment theory from infancy, right? And so these are 1, protection, 2, attunement, 3, reassurance and soothing, 4, pride and self-worth, 5, guidance and mentoring, 6, conflict navigation, and 7, ease and fluidity. So you can see how if you have maybe an unmet need of pride and self-worth, you might have people-pleasing tendencies because you attach your self-worth and value to people needing you or people liking you or people being interested in you. How do we even see the signs? How do you know the signs? And again, I am not an expert at this, so I'm just sharing my own experiences, but I am going to share some of the things that I found from Dr. Nedra Tawwab, who is a therapist. She's a New York Times bestselling author. She wrote the book Set Boundaries, Find Peace, which I will link in the show notes. she just describes like things that you can see in a relationship that may help you identify whether this is a codependent relationship. One is that in codependency relationships, there is a giver and there is a taker. So one person is the person who has needs, so that's the taker. And then there's another person who needs to be needed, which is the giver. The needs for each person then set the stage for an unhealthy, imbalanced relationship, which often leads to burnout, anger, resentment, and overall codependency. The other sign that you are codependent as a friend is when you are trying to fix, control, or save your friend. That was 100% me. I was trying to fix this person and other people in my life where somebody would bring me a problem, they'd be venting, and I'm like, I need to find the solution for it. I need to connect you with this resource. I need to do this. And yes, there was an altruistic part of me that wanted to do it, but there was also a part of me that was like, what if they don't need me anymore? Like, what if my role in their life is gone? Like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to mean to this person? Now, because we've talked about why codependency can manifest, right? It's often because of an insecure, anxious attachment style in unhealthy families, but I think it can even happen to people who maybe may have been raised in normal families, but may have had some sort of trauma in their lives that led them to this codependency. But if you grew up in unhealthy families, it's very normal for you to just develop codependent relationship, whether it's romance, friendships. And what you think in this role, it's such a skewed thought, is like your job is to change other people and help them change. Now, there's a big difference between empathy and codependency, according to Dr. Tawwab, and that is with empathy, you understand how a person feels without you taking on their feelings, right? You can just you can hold space for them, but you don't become enmeshed in their outcomes. You can also help them without being consumed. It's almost like you can go in, help them fix the problem, and not worry so much or be attached to the outcome of the solution of their problem. So when people don't take your advice, you don't take it personally, you've done your job, you step away, you know what you've done, and you can move on. Some of the things, the thoughts that happen with people who are codependent. So I wanted to talk about maybe like a thought model of codependency. So I wanted to go to like thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. I think the biggest thought of codependency and people pleasing is that I need people to need me so I can feel better. Or my value is dependent on who likes me or who I help or what I do. Or my worth is tied to the relationships that I have created or the people in my life. As you can see, these thoughts obviously don't serve you when you're in that, but they can be very indulgent thoughts. Like, of course, like they need me. I need to be needed, right? And what can happen, though, is that these thoughts, right, cause us to be very insecure, right? To be almost like self-absorbed, because it's like we are so constantly scanning the environment for signs that people are happy with us, people like us, people, want us to do things, or people need us in their lives. And we also become very much like hypervigilant. So we are very, very aware of how people are responding to when we speak or when we offer them help. And those feelings obviously then create actions of us, like, for example, not having good boundaries, right? Not saying no when we want to say no, saying yes out of obligation or guilt, and also becoming very enmeshed in the outcomes of the people in our lives, like becoming very enmeshed in like, do they take our advice? Who are they being friends with? What are they doing? Sometimes even getting in a role where we want to protect them from other people hurting them. We start to hold grudges against the people that maybe they're holding grudges against. It can be very, very, again, indulgent. Like, it can also feel like very like, oh, you're doing the Lord's work, for example. Like, oh, but I just need to help this person and they need me and they're so helpless. The result of these actions, though, is that we get in a pattern where if people don't need us, we lose our sense of worth. And so that attachment to other people needing us, attaching their worth to what we're doing, our worth to what we're doing for them in their lives, when we are not quote unquote needed, then we might start to feel like we are not wanted, we don't belong, we are not good enough. And it can even result in like resentment towards other people, right? I also want to share a thought that may be with codependency, people pleasing, which is I need to say yes to everybody. And when you're people pleasing, one of the most interesting things is that you say to everybody, yes to everybody except yourself. So it can look like accepting to maybe like host a party when your mother-in-law asks you, even if you didn't want to, because you don't want to hurt her feelings, or offering to do something for a friend because you feel terrible that you're not going to do it, but then doing it and being resentful towards them. When you have these thoughts, the emotions, the feelings that can come out of it can also be very like controlling emotions, annoyed, dictatorial, like you want them to do things your way. And the actions you take from these feelings are obviously actions that don't improve your relationships. Actually, they're much to the detriment of your relationship. And the result that you have is not only are you not pleasing yourself, right? But you create a culture of people being so attached to you're pleasing them that when you say no, it's like you're constantly afraid of losing people in your life because you've attached this worth like, I am only valuable to these people if I can make them happy, right? Or I say yes to these people while I say no to myself. And that can be obviously very like exhausting for a person. You know, when you have spent so much of your life trying to be a people pleaser, trying to, help other people, it can also create an environment where the result of that is that you have like this almost unmanaged expectations of what other people should do for you. One of the things that I think is interesting, especially in people pleasing, is when you're a people pleaser, right? Like you always say yes, and you're always the first to offer support, and you're always the first to show up to the thing. And then when you need the help and people can't, quote unquote, read your mind and know what you need, you may find yourself getting very resentful, very angry, very vengeful. The result of that in your relationships obviously means that you're not showing up authentically in the relationships as you usually would because you feel like people don't understand you or people don't care about you or people are using you. And it's not a great place to be in life. Like when you feel like people have let you down, quote unquote, because they're not showing up for you the way you showed up for them. And I think that can be, it's an unfair expectation of other people, obviously, because they can't read your mind. But when we show up in life doing things with the expectation that others, quote unquote, come through for us, it's almost like I'm only doing things so that people can do them for me when I need them too. And it's almost an unfair ask of other people. Like, I will only do for you. It's almost like scratch your back and I'll scratch your back. And that's not how we want to show up in relationships, even though like friendships, there's a quality of our friendships and relationships that should be reciprocal. I think that reciprocity should be very much out of a place of agency from the other person to reciprocate what they're receiving from the relationship. What I wanted now to switch gears to is talk about, so what do you do when you have been codependent or when you have been a people pleaser? Like, what are the thoughts that maybe can help you get out of those patterns? And how do you break the habit of people pleasing and codependency? One of the thoughts that I think has served me well in just breaking out of that mold is that I am worthy of love and belonging and that I don't have to be performative to earn my worthiness, right? The way I show up in my relationships now, like I show up because I want to be in these relationships. I show up not out of obligation or not out of expectation. I show up because I want to be a friend. I show up from a place of openness and love that I have this thought that no matter how I'm perceived by other people, like I am so worthy of love and belonging. I don't have to earn it. I don't have to be a pick-me, quote unquote, like, please be my friend. Like, I want to be your friend. And it's come with having to do my own self-work, having to be aware that I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. And I think one of the biggest breakthroughs in my life, navigating people pleasing and codependency, has been the amount of energy and time I have created in my own life by only being in relationships that I want to be in and that are fully me, being fully authentic in myself and showing up because I'm valued and because I value myself. And so it's not saying that if you're in a relationship with somebody and you feel like it's a codependent relationship, like there's something wrong with the other person, or that you need to be like solving for their issue and solving for yours. I think that they can remain who they are, and you can either decide that that friendship doesn't serve you or stay in the friendship with a very differently managed mind. So, like I said, that is one thought. And then the other thought is that I accept myself as I am, and I am allowing other people to show up as who they want to be. And the third one is that I don't have to be needed. And that one is kind of a difficult one because, again, remember, I've lived over 35 years of my life with the understanding that people need me to solve problems for them, that people need me to troubleshoot issues, that people need my support. And now I'm having to say, no, I'm not necessarily needed. It's like that thought of go where you wanted, not tolerated. So I don't have to be needed in order to feel validated. And so the feelings that come with that are, I am devoted, I am affectionate, I inspired, I am kind to myself, I practice self-compassion, I am empathetic, right? But I have broken that habit of the pattern of people pleasing and being codependent. And it allows me to also be very reflective and evaluate how I show up in the relationships that I'm in order to show up as my highest self, like to really evaluate, like, how am I in these relationships? And is this how I want to continue showing up? The other thing that I think is important to say is that I think when I have understood what reciprocity really means in a friendship is that it doesn't mean like tit for tat or like, you know, you do this and I do this and that's why it's a friendship. Reciprocity is just like having that peaceful awareness that we can both rely on each other and that the friendship is not attached. We're not attached to each other in a relationship based on need. Like, we both want to be there. That if I couldn't do anything for you tomorrow, would this relationship still stand? Right? Like, do we enjoy each other's company enough? And do we have enough memories and experiences that our relationship would withhold whether or not you needed me to do something for you tomorrow? And I think one of the best examples of that is like, I have friends that I've been friends with since high school, close friends, my best friend, my maid of honor, like we're super close. And we go, you know, a year without seeing each other and we pick up where we left off with no expectations. And I think that for me is like my goal standard for the friendships that I want to have is whether or not I'm needed, like that friendship still has a standing. And what I wanted to share too is the actions that you take from a place of, you know, being open and curious is that you start practicing healthy boundaries and you commit to being a better version of yourself that is separate from others, right? So breaking that cycle of unhealthy behaviors, of unmanaged expectations, of being being enmeshed in the problems of other people. Even just noticing like when you are picking sides, quote unquote, like based on what like the other person in the relationship has told you about their other friends or their partner or whatever the codependency is about, like just being in that awareness of, oh, I notice that I'm starting to like resent this other person based on what I've heard from this other person, and that's not really my place. I think it's a lot of like self-checking, quote unquote, like, am I really showing up like for me, or am I showing up because I think that's what's expected of me in this relationship? Do I want to have this sort of enmeshment with my friendships that is because I'm being needed? Do I find myself resenting this person when they have, quote unquote, no need for me? Do I want to be that friend that no matter what, I can show up in this friendship because I want to be in it. Like I can just be, I can be myself, and I don't have to be performative, and I don't have to, show a part of me that doesn't exist. I just like, can I show up as myself, right? Can I be detached from the ego of being needed and create a relationship based on worthiness of myself and a value of myself and of others? So I really want you to like just notice in your relationships where you are showing up and practicing that like maybe unhealthy cycle of codependency, and deciding like to show up for yourself in a way that you want to be in the relationships that you want to create. Before I go, I want to share something from Young Pueblo, who I quote here on the podcast quite a bit. It's about self-love and self-performance. And so he says, the importance of self-love and self-acceptance in personal transformation work is critical. This is the energy that allows us to embrace ourselves completely and move forward with less friction into healthier ways of living. Similarly, humanity is currently experiencing an expansion of compassion. More individuals are recognizing that their love had limits and are working to expand it to include all people. Before healing takes place, the primary motivators of most human beings are craving and aversion. The accumulation of craving and aversion throughout history has formed the society we know today. All of this is held under a system of short-sighted, greed-based economics that threatens our ability to live well on our planet. Collectively, we have not yet learned how to accept our differences and treat them without fear, nor have we stopped trying to change and control each other. And we are still working on thinking long-term. End quote. So I just want you to remember that self-love and self-acceptance is so important. And so if you have found yourself in these patterns, like nothing has gone wrong, you're just learning and you are building who you are and you are starting to heal. And the last thing I want to share again from Young Pueblo is this other one where he says, 3 sources of hurt: attachment, expectation, judgment. 3 sources of healing: compassion, commitment, observation. End quote. So commit to yourself today. Show yourself compassion. Be willing to observe. Be willing to be committed. Be willing to notice where you're attached, where you're expectant of others unfairly, and where you're being judgmental if you want to change your life. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm still trying to recover my voice. I have no idea what is going on, but we'll get better. It's finally fall, and I hope you are having a great week. Oh, before I go, I almost forgot. I want to invite you to a masterclass on October 22nd, 2022 at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. In this masterclass, it's called the Mindset Management 101. I will teach you how to change your mindset so that you can have the life you deserve. So if you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated, this masterclass is definitely for you. We're going to address topics like perfectionism, overthinking, indecision. And if you're in a cycle of overeating, overspending, overdrinking, overworking, all those things, people-pleasing, codependency, you will not want to miss this masterclass. So go to stethoscopestoswaddles.com/masterclass to register. And I hope to see you there. I'm going to include the link also in the show notes of this episode. We'll have a great time. We'll talk about all the things about changing your mindset, deciding on purpose. Be prepared to change your mindset. It's going to be amazing if I do say so myself, and I can't wait to have you there. So I'll see you next week, hopefully with a less hoarse voice. Nevertheless, I'll still be here next week. All right, bye now. I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you've been listening to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. New episodes are out every Monday. These episodes are created by me, Shira Bergbauer, and produced by Cassidy Mitchell. If you enjoyed this show or found it helpful, please rate it and review us on Apple Podcasts. If the concepts I share on this podcast resonate with you, or you're ready to change your relationships and mindset, I can help you. If you'd like in-depth, personalized support, I'd love to invite you to apply for my Life and Mindset coaching program. Just imagine you and I every week working together as I teach you the tools to up-level your life. To book your free 1-hour consultation call, go to www.stethoscopestoswaddles.com/consultation. You're doing a great job, Mama. Have a great week. Bye now.